First, we have to say that we are feeling so much gratitude for this practice of walking and talking, walking and being in deep contemplation. It's become very therapeutic. And these therapeutic moments are definitely needed as we continue to have this human experience. We just feel better, like emotionally, after having this time of expression and sharing. And the gratitude is for any folks out there that are being a part of the conversation. What's amazing about this practice, though, and the sharing and the expression is that it's become so recognizably beneficial that now we just do it anyway. You know, podcasts or whatever. Not even necessarily podcasts, but like anyone listening or no, like it's okay. It's okay. It's become a form of self-care and more recognition at how important that is. Taking care of ourselves first, especially in triggering moments. This word triggering has been around for a while now. People are like using it all the time, like throwing around triggering, I'm triggered. And it's great. It's great that we're all in the lingo of this experience of what it means to have an encounter of some sorts that leads to an intense emotion. And when we are in intense emotion, it's very challenging for us to practice emotional intelligence. Becoming educated and practicing emotional intelligence has just been a game changer. Just a game changer. A methodical way to maintain a sense of peace and connection to energy. So this walking and talking and processing practice has become very helpful and supportive in those triggering moments. And though we're sharing it with you, this practice, it's not novel. It's been around for a while. When people just get so at their point, they're like, I gotta take a walk. It would be interesting to see what would happen in those triggered moments within relationships and dynamics of relationships if more folks decided to take a walk than continue the argument or whatever the trigger may be. What the trigger does is generate an intense emotion. That emotion is an energy. It's a feeling, it's a frequency. It comes up for a reason, usually to teach us something, show us something, reveal something. And in order to know that, there needs to be some introspective around that first. It doesn't mean to not address the circumstances, but to see it as part of the journey, to see it as part of the experience, to see it as a manifestation of an experience to teach us something so that we can continue to evolve and move forward. To give that some context, we have found recently some continuous triggers that lead us to moments where we have to be strong, if you will, especially strong for ourselves. Strong for our own voice, standing up for ourselves, a practice that hasn't always been part of our normal behavior. We have defaulted into people pleasing and avoiding conflict and growing into the vision that we have for this continued journey, for this life, this lifeline, this lifetime, this incarnation. This vision that's calling us requires personal strength, requires someone who is not afraid to speak up and to love ourselves so strongly that we stick up for ourselves. And because we set that intention with the universe, we set an intention this year, the beginning of the year, to fall deeply in love with ourselves. We set that intention so clearly with the universe. We connected source energy and we said, listen up, okay? This is what is on deck. Deep self-love. And of course, there's a romanticized version of what that looks like. Because so much of our initial knowledge around love, quote unquote, is romantic based. And yes, the romance with ourselves has definitely been increased experiences and magical. And we are discovering that this intention is also inclusive of what we said, a deep self-love, deep love. And for our experience, having that deep love means using our voice, not allowing others to gaslight us, growing in personal strength, knowing we got our own back. That's love. And increasing our emotional intelligence and awareness, consciousness, increasing. All of this is love. And so that casting to the universe was met with these manifestations, these experiences or opportunities or folks, circumstances, whether it's internal, in our interpersonal world, or if it's happening in the outer world, in the collective. In order to achieve that deep self-love, we must navigate through the manifestations that will show us how that can come about. So if we bring it back to the walking and the talking and the emotional intelligence and the processing and the triggers, to give that some context, the current trigger that we are walking off is frustration with some folks that we have been working on a specific project together for 9 months, many thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in. And the most recent correspondence was completely missing 90% of the work that was done prior, but yet this work was going into presentation mode. Like, we're trying to bring this project into the end zone. You know, we're like 5-yard line and we need the A game to be brought. And that was not the experience. Most commonly, we would refer to these things as major mistakes or oversights. Major. And how could we be having major oversights 9 months in from something we've been talking about since day one? We had to cackle. And that's the gratitude, because that's the emotional intelligence, in this sense that we're laughing about it. We're breathing about it. We're trying to calmly communicate our concerns now. But first and foremost, we're introspective of, since this is happening, this is coming up, what is it here to show us? Because this keeps happening. And it's very confusing. It doesn't make sense, quote unquote. That can oftentimes, we have felt in our own experience, be a signal from the universe. Okay, universe, we're paying attention. We do need to move forward to resolve this, resolve the circumstance. And that conversation has been requested, which is why we're taking the walk, so that we can diffuse the trigger before we go into that conversation. Because what's not helpful to anyone in that circumstance is for us to come in super fired up in that conversation. Like, what the fuck? Not helpful to come into that situation. If you think about it, most folks who are coming into that situation begin to have some spectrum of traumatic response. And it is very challenging for any true connection, communication, creativity, collaboration to come through when people are triggered or in traumatic response. If we think about it for a second, just imaginative type moment. There's been a mistake. We'll call it workplace, right? You're in the workplace. There's been a mistake over an oversight or miscommunication, and perhaps it caused a large problem. Then you have the person on the other side of that. Maybe that's management, the client, whatever. And they're really triggered by this mistake. And they're like, let's have a call, let's have a meeting. And you're like, oh, God. Oh, goddess. Okay. Because you can already tell from that person that they're fired up. They're triggered. They're what the fuck. They're all caps in the email. So coming into that situation can be a triggering, traumatic response. In like, you either shut down. We either shut down or we just go into fight or flight. A very sad misunderstanding that the workplace could become equivalent to like parental household dictation. When you're like, oh, I'm at work, I'm getting in trouble. I'm going to get in trouble at work. To have that type of dynamic with any employer or employee, that would be the case. So sad that that's come into the workplace, but some folks experience it. There's a rampant version of that in a lot of corporate America. So that's one like emotional cocktail of the person coming into that conversation on one side. Emotional cocktail of fear, unworthiness, walls up, trauma response. Then the other person coming into that conversation is the hot trigger, is the anger, is the frustration, the projection of that. When the fuse is still lit, when the sparks are still flying, that's not the time to continue the conversation or have the conversation. That energy only alarms the other energies around it. Like, hey, this person's about to unleash. It's a very interesting way to break down that dynamic and that circumstance in order to find a way that's actually more productive. No tantrums are really necessary. No emotional tantrums. But that's an emotionally intelligent response. This does not mean that we bypass our emotions, because those are the teachers. So in this context, our frustration is our teacher. What can we learn in this moment to navigate this energy that's been generated? What's interesting that came up is that initially there was a reaction, which means we really wanted to write the what the fuck email in reply. And we sat there with our head down and just breathed and took some time to write a very simple email, keeping it simple, the explanation of the initial thoughts, and requesting a face-to-face meeting to hash out the rest. And in between that email and the meeting is this walk and this breathing and this processing and this coming to an understanding of what this is manifesting and how it's guiding us. And to share what that is it's just guiding us into more trust. The reason why it wasn't a touchdown is the timing. That we really wanted the timing to be now. Trusting that the experience is guiding us on a journey to help us grow in so many other ways, even outside of this just one situation. It's giving us skills and growth for many other situations to come. To trust in the co-creation. To trust that things are being guided. And it doesn't always look like what we think it would look like. It's beyond our expectations within our own mind because this is the universal mind at work. And taking this moment to breathe and find that trust shifts our energy and our emotion out of the triggered place and into trust, which is so beneficial to coming into the conversations that we need to now come into, and not with sparks flying. Simply not necessary to get that fired up when we find our breath and when we find our trust. Some folks do believe that in order to be impactful or in order to try and control another or control an outcome, you need to come at it with this fire and this fury and this aggression, because that strikes fear. And fear is a way to control. Sure, it's also a frequency. It would be interesting to just contemplate and see how many folks would take that as an example and basically just sit with the question, what would you find more influential or impactful to your change in behavior or correction of a mistake or taking responsibility if the other person in the situation with you came to you in a conversation that was respectful, that didn't have a charge to it, that wasn't a moment of projecting their own emotions of anger or frustration, whatever the projection is, thinking that projection will somehow bring them ease. To break it down a little bit, would you rather have a conversation with someone without projecting emotions onto each other and be able to productively work through the conversation? And if there's differences, perhaps they come together, perhaps they don't. Perhaps there's an opportunity to see the other side and the other see your side. Or would you rather get yelled at and say, what the fuck? Would you rather feel like you're in trouble, inferior, that one person would think they would have domain or dominion over your peace? It would be interesting to see how many folks would choose one scenario over the other. We certainly side. Personally, we would definitely go with the emotionally intelligent, non-aggressive communication side that allows each person to have space and be heard, find a solution, and move forward. Seeing the lessons, seeing the reveals, growing, expanding, breathing, walking, and talking into trust. Thank you so much for joining us with this contemplation. This is Deep Dose, and we are Eden.